And welcome to New Wave Global. You are watching Unraveled with Marvi Sirmed. And today we are not going to discuss the battlefield, the strategy, what is going on, the geopolitics of the US Israel strikes on Iran. Instead, we are going to ask a very, very simple question. How much is this war actually costing? Because whenever wars begin, governments talk about security, deterrence, national interest, blah, blah, blah. But the financial cost, the burden ultimately carried by common people, the taxpayers, often emerges slowly, piece by piece, through the scattered reporting after a long time sometimes. Over the past few days, several major international media outlets, especially those working from the US, have tried to estimate the price tag of the U.S. military operation against Iran. I mean, U.S. Israel joint military operation against Iran. It's a war. Um, and what is fascinating is that each of them is looking at a completely different layer of the cost. So today, what we're trying to do is, so I'll walk you through those reports one by one to understand the full picture, a bigger picture. According to this story published on March the 3rd, just a few days ago, the story was published by Forbes. The opening phase of President Trump's military strikes on Iran may have already cost more than $1 billion. This report notes that even a short burst of modern warfare, it burns through money extremely quickly. For example, the cruise missiles, precision guided bombs, career strike, the group operations, aerial refueling, surveillance, aircraft, logistics, all of them, they all, accumulate the costs within hours. The Forbes analysis suggests that hundreds of millions of dollars were spent almost immediately, and that the total cost crossed the $1 billion threshold very early in the campaign. But this number, important as it is, represents only the first layer of cost, the price of the initial strikes themselves. And that is where the next report becomes important. It comes from a research cited by several outlets, according to estimates from the Cost of War project at Brown University. It was published in way back, actually, October 2025. So hold your breath. I will explain why I'm saying that. So it was originally published in October 2025. Uh, so according to this, the U.S. military operations across the wider, Middle Eastern region since October 2023 had already cost between 9.65 billion and 12.07 billion. Over 9 billion to 12 billion. It had already cost. So the same research also notes that the United States also provided $21.7 billion in military aid to Israel during that period, 2023 to 2025. Now, that brings the broader regional security expenditure to over 30 billion already. What this tells us is that the strikes on Iran are not occurring in, isolation. They are unfolding within an already expensive regional military posture, which also involved Yemen, the Red Sea, the broader deterrence deployment, so to speak. So when we ask what this new conflict costs, we are really asking how much additional spending is being, layered onto an already massive military presence. Now, let us turn to the most expansive financial estimates so far. According to a report published on March 2, 2026, and this report was published by Fortune magazine. It cites analysis from the economist Kent Smetter's Penn Wharton budget model. Now, according to his analysis, the direct budgetary cost of the US operation against Iran, the current one, could range between 40 billion to 95 billion dollars. Yes. Now, this article suggests midpoint between between these figures. So that midpoint the article suggests is it estimates of roughly around 65 billion dollars once operational costs, equipment losses, and replacement of munitions, all of them are included. But the analysis goes further. The report also suggests that the broader economic impact on the US economy could reach as high as $210 billion dollars once factors like energy prices, financial markets, and overall economic uncertainty are considered. In other words, the real cost of war may extend far beyond the Pentagon budget. Another, you know, let's move on. It's a very useful overview. It comes from an sort of an explainer, which was also published on March 3, 2026 by Al Jazeera. Now, that report notes that the US operation involved more than 20 different weapon systems and over 1,000 targets were struck. Now, that highlights the scale and complexity of the current campaign. This article, the Al Jazeera article, it also emphasizes that uh, calculating the cost of such an operation, expansive operation, complex, layered operation, is difficult because modern warfare, it includes multiple layers of spending, as I have already said. For example, direct strike costs, then deployment of aircraft carriers and bombers, then intelligence and surveillance operations. Massive surveillance would have been needed for this. The intelligence has its own cost. It doesn't come cheap. And especially under the regime the kind of regime that is there in Iran and that has been there for a while. And then there's a replenishment of the weapon stockpiles afterwards. So the Al Jazeera report, it also reiterates the Brown University estimates, which I cited earlier, and showed that tens of billions of dollars have already been spent on regional operations in recent years. Um, Now, replacing the weapons, but perhaps the most important reporting, it comes from Reuters. So, according to the report that was published on March 4, just a couple of days ago, in by Reuters, the US officials have begun consultations with major defense contractors, and this was basically reported by many newspapers. I'm just quoting Reuters. So major defense contractors were contacted by, were consulted by the US officials because the strikes on Iran have significantly depleted American weapon stockpiles. Now, here comes the Reuters reports that I was citing. That says the Pentagon is preparing a supplemental budget, uh, you know, uh, budget request that could reach around $50 billion, largely to replenish the missiles, munitions, etc., which are being used in the conflict. Now, this includes systems such as Tomahawk cruise missiles and other, precision-guided weapons, which are expensive and take time to manufacture. In other words, the strikes themselves may only be the beginning. The real spending surge may come after the war, when the Pentagon restocks the arsenal. So, moving on. A more critical perspective comes from a report published again on March 4th by Responsible Statecraft. It cites a new analysis from the Center for American Progress. That analysis estimates that US taxpayers had already spent more than $5 billion as of March 2. Yes, this March 2 on, operations, various operations related to the conflict, the current conflict. Now, this report says that this number that I've just cited, it includes the strikes on Iran, the operations against Houthi forces in Yemen, the regional force deployments. There are American forces deployed in region, the entire region as well. The cost of the lost or damaged equipment, munitions, etc. So, this particular article also notes that this figure could be a conservative, quite a conservative estimate, because some costs, such as the damaged radar systems or missile inceptors, the missile in, what do you call missile interceptors, they, by the way, are expensive, quite an expensive. According to one estimate, one interceptor may cost roughly from $1 million to $1.5 million. So, all of this, the missile systems, damaged radar systems, interceptors, etc., all of them, add to this cost. And in this particular cost, the cost of these, the damaged equipment, the damaged systems, the interceptors, that might not even be included, because it's difficult to to estimate how much would be damaged. So, whatever is damaged, how many interceptors are being used, their cost might even not be available to us, during the war. We might have our hand on that afterwards, much after the war. Uh, yeah. So, moving on. Another analysis, which was published by the Institute for Policy Studies and the National Priorities Project, that takes quite a different approach. Their estimate suggests that US military systems operating in and around Iran were costing roughly $59 million per day. Yes, take a breath. $59 million per day. This calculation is deliberately conservative, and it excludes many categories of spending, some of which I have already explained: interceptors, damage systems, radar systems, etc. But it illustrates something important. Even when the war is not dominating headlines, the meter is still running. You know, the cost is still adding on and on and on and accumulating on and on and on. And finally, there is the question of how long this war might last. You know, according to reporting published on March 2 by AP, Associated Press, President Trump initially expected the military campaign against Iran to last 4 to 5 weeks. You must have heard about that report. You must have read that report. So he said that 4 to 5 weeks. Although the officials have acknowledged that operations could continue longer, much longer than that, depending on the developments. And even probably President Trump has also, expressed this change of his own opinion. Now, that matters enormously for all kinds of estimates. Because if the campaign lasts weeks rather than days, the financial implications change. Obviously, they change dramatically. So what we have learned from all those reports, first, the opening phase of the war likely crossed the $1 billion mark almost immediately, according to estimates, reported by Forbes. Second, the broader estimates suggest the cost could already be several $1 billion, according to analyses cited by I just cited by Responsible Statecraft and Al Jazeera and others. Third, the Pentagon may soon request tens of billions more to replace weapons, maintain military readiness, blah blah blah. And that has also been reported by various sources, most importantly by Reuters. And finally, long-term projections suggest the total cost could rise to tens of billions or even more, depending on how long the conflict continues. And this is also this aspect is also covered by the analysis I cited by Fortune. But perhaps the most important takeaway is this: the true cost of war is rarely visible at the moment the bombs fall. It it unfolds slowly through replacement budgets, through expanded deployments, through economic ripple effects. Some of the countries have already started feeling those ripple effects. Through political decisions that normalize permanent military spending, which means that when the public hears that a war cost $1 billion, the real number, months or years later, is often far larger, far, far larger. So the next time someone asks you how much the strikes on Iran cost, the honest answer may be, we still don't know. Because the bill for war rarely arrives all at once. It arrives in installments, and the largest ones usually come later. Thank you for watching. This is Unraveled with Marvi Sirmed, and please do subscribe to our channel. And if you like this episode, give us a thumbs up. This is an act of kindness, and this is an act of supporting independent journalism. Thank you very much. Stay tuned for the next episode. We will come very soon again. Have a good one. Bye.